And you already forgot it?
I got locked out because I immediately forgot it in my computer when I had to go up to IT and get them to.
Do you do roll call after land acknowledgement? Feels like we do land acknowledgement and then roll call.
I think so.
I don't remember.
Oh, that's the way it is on the agenda.
Yeah.
Land acknowledgement first.
Okay.
Do you have that?
Yeah, I pulled one.
Do you want me to
Out of
call
nowhere.
the roll? Or, yeah, call the,
Yeah, I'll turn to you for roll
okay.
call. Oh, I guess I could.
No, it's all right.
I just forgot Katie wasn't over
Yeah,
there.
so I was negotiating with her before the meeting, but I wrote down everyone's names.
Okay,
I'm not going to
perfect.
do it in the system.
Yeah, no, you don't have to. Okay. Okay, I would like to call this meeting to order. The March 18th session of the Planning Commission. Can everybody hear me okay? Or, okay, I'll just be extra loud tonight. I'd like to start with the land acknowledgement. We wish to acknowledge the original custodians of the land on which we are gathering, the Anishinaabe people. We wish to honor and respect their continuing culture and traditions and the contribution they make to the life of our community. And I will turn to Ms. Sichterman for the roll call.
Curry,
Here.
Swanson,
Here.
Knapp,
Here.
McGilvery,
Here.
Heller. Here. Anderson,
Here.
O'Brien,
Here.
Cameron,
He may be attending his work obligation at the
Okay.
moment.
and Hershey is absent and excused. I'm not sure about Treadway yet.
Treadwell.
Sorry.
I'm sure he'll be here shortly. So topics for consideration. It looks like we have three big items tonight. The first one is the public hearing and consideration of a SLUP from Safe Harbor, and I'll turn to the planning director.
Yeah, thank you. So this is the public hearing for the SLUP that we discussed at the last meeting as an introduction. So as you are aware, there's a currently SLUP-approved emergency shelter at 517 Wellington, operated by Safe Harbor of Grand Traverse, Inc. They currently operate as a seasonal shelter, meaning they can operate, I believe it is from October 15th to May 15th. And they have been working in partnership with the Northwest Michigan Coalition to End Homelessness, as well as the city and other partners on exploring ways to help address the unhoused population and some of the housing struggles that we have. And so one option is to convert this to a year-round emergency shelter. So that is the public hearing that we have today. There is a SLUP that has a number of standards I'd like to go over with you, as well as the SLUP review and approval process. But if you're fine with that, Vice Chair, I'd like to do that after the public hearing.
Sounds good to me. Does anyone want to make comment before because we could just start with the public hearing if Mr. Winter is going to address us in the SLUP after. Are we good to go that route? Okay, great. So let's open the public hearing for agenda item A, the Safe Harbor SLUP. Would anyone like to make public comment on this topic?
All right, if you are making a comment, please state your name and address, and you will have 3 minutes, please.
My name is Justin Reed. I'm a Traverse City resident. I'd like to say that with this shelter being year-round, is it will be a beneficial impact for the city because that will drive more resources for people finding housing. Because at one time I was homeless and I went through the process of resources, found housing, and all of this. And I've been a proud member of the city, and I've, participate every chance I have. And, if this eventually goes to the city commission and folks say, well, we didn't get the memo or we didn't get the message, it's not a secret. Pretty much all the meetings are published. They're online, and they're on the board outside of the governmental center. So, like I said, I support this, and this is a very good chance to help out the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment on this item?
Darcy Pickering, Traverse City. I've had an opportunity to be with a lot of the homeless and those suffering with mental health and substance use disorders in the Pines, at Safe Harbor, working at Traverse House, and ministering through Keys to Freedom Ministries. We've seen, obviously, a continued uptick in people coming here, and I do appreciate Safe Harbor. I'm concerned about it being year-round in a neighborhood. I'm not really in favor of 24/7, but I'm not sure of what conditions this is going to be and the time frame of when the residents will be there. So I can't talk to that, but I am concerned about the money. We got $1.1 million to run Safe Harbor for 1 year and another 1.1 for the second year. Is this sustainable? I mean, where's this money coming from? Where's it going to come from in 3 years? And by my calculations, if you took that money, divided it by 65, there's usually about 65, 70 people there, and you divide it by 65 or 70, and by 12 months, you have about $1,300 or so for rent for each person. And with QRT, which I'm part of, they have 12 primary stakeholders and about 45 to 50 secondary stakeholders. So there are lots of people involved and lots of resources available that could put these people in housing with support services. We also have lots of charitable people and churches. That is where Safe Harbor came from in the beginning. So I just make those comments because we require, I'm on the Community Corrections Board also, we require personal responsibility and personal accountability. And our success rate at Community Corrections is about 76%. We also have a good success rate at Keys to Freedom Ministries because we require certain things of the people that we serve. And so I would ask to just, as you look into the future after 2 years, please think about these kinds of things, and can we put them in housing with all of the people that are working, the 45, 50, 60 agencies that are working with QRT, and we're all in this together. So I appreciate the fact that you would just look at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other public comment on this topic? Seeing no one jumping to the mic, I'm going to close public comment and then turn it over to the planning director and then back to the board.
So as we discussed at the last meeting, there is no planned physical expansion of the building there at 517 Wellington, or an expansion of the already approved operating capacity of 90 beds. Really, all this is changing is the 5 months a year where they're not allowed to operate. So with all SLUPs, well, back to site improvements, they are proposing, as we discussed last time, a parking lot on the east side of their property. There were some questions initially as to why it was so far east, but that would support the potential, if a need ever be, to expand the building to the east without encroaching into that parking lot. So whenever we have a SLUP, the Planning Commission is required to have a public hearing and make a recommendation to the board, the City Commission. You can recommend to approve with conditions, or deny. Ultimately, the City Commission has the final say, so you could recommend denial and they could approve it, or vice versa. It really comes down to them. But the most important role for the Planning Commission is to establish a record, if you will, of evidence for your decision that you make, and that is the purpose of the staff report. So SLUPs have 2 categories of standards that they have to meet. The first are the general standards. These apply to all SLUP uses. The second one are the specific standards, so those standards specific to this particular use in that case. So in order to answer that, we have reviewed the application as well as all our regulatory documents, and we also distributed a checklist, which was in your packet, to the staff members that are, department heads rather, that are involved in development review and things like that, to chime in and inform that information. So before well, it's actually written as part of the motion, the Planning Commission will need to adopt a finding of fact. That is the basis in the record for which you made your decision. And again, the staff report is intended to serve as that purpose. So you have each standard in your report. You have the applicant's response that we ask them to provide, as well as the staff response and whether or not from staff's perspective that was satisfied. Now, the Planning Commission does not have to agree with that. What I would ask, though, is that if this body as a whole wishes to change one of the findings in the report under staff, that we go ahead and we'll change it in real time in the document so that everyone can see, we'll pull it up on the screen, what that language is, so they're confident in what they are approving or recommending, rather, to the City Commission. So you have had that since Thursday. If there's any specific questions on it, I'll go over it. I won't go through every one piece by piece with you since you have that in front of you. I will note that we, as staff, have recommended approving with conditions, and those conditions and potential motion are listed at the bottom of that staff report, and they specifically include constructing a sidewalk from that new east parking lot to the sidewalk that exists along the south side of the building, just for ease of pedestrian movement to the building, that they may begin operating May 15th through October 15th, even though the improvements probably won't be finished yet at that point. We know that takes time. They can't really go out for bid on this type of stuff and line up a contractor until they know they are approved. So we put a final date that those site improvements, mainly the parking lot and retention basins and the sidewalk that is being added there, be done by November 15th. And the relevance of November 15th is that's when the asphalt plant closes for the season. So all that work needs to be done by then. Otherwise, it can't be done until the following year. And then, of course, all applicable standards and requirements need to be met and permits issued. So they can't simply begin construction if the SLUP gets approved. They then have to apply for their stormwater permit, their fire approval, their land use permit, all the official permits that would be issued under this document and approval should it go that way. And of course, the Planning Commission, as you can see there, has another sample motion, which would be to simply recommend denial of this. So that would be the language, if that is the will of the commission on that one. And then the last thing I'll add is that we do have representation here from the applicant team. So if there's any specific questions, they are willing to come to the podium to address those to the body.
My first and really only remark would be this is the nicest SLUP process we've ever been through, in my experience. It is really organized. I really like the checklists. I have never seen these before. So kudos to the planning department because it makes it really easy to review all of the documentation. It makes it really concise to review the applicant response, staff response, suggestion. Like, it's never been this clear before. So I really appreciate it. So I'll turn it over to the group. Commissioner McGilvery?
I have a question. Can you explain what Frank Tuturi's comments mean?
Yes, yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And I have spoken, because this went to design team already, and that was mentioned there for the first time. So there is some temporary agreements in place for snow storage on that property until improvements happen. And I spoke with the city attorney about that. She's well aware that would all be cleaned up through the city commission's action.
Okay. You asked a lot of people, a surprising number of people, inside and outside of this city. Did you ask the library?
Nope, I sat down with the city attorney and she helped craft the list of who needed to be asked based on the standards. So like TCAPS and MDOT, the standards specifically talk about highways and schools. So those are the ones that we needed to ask for legal purposes because that's what the standard says.
Last question. The operating plan is part of the special land use permit?
Yes. yep.
Okay, and I asked because one of the neighbors did write and wanted to make sure the quarterly meetings continued, safety meetings or outreach meetings, whatever their title. And that is, it is part of the plan, so that will continue.
I believe so, yep. And the operating plan, I think, also sometimes is referenced as a management plan in different documents, so they are the same.
Commissioner Anderson?
Thank you. I was interested in whether there's any more detail available, excuse me, about the stormwater engineering approval and the timing on that and the process.
Yep, so that will come after any potential SLUP approval, so they can't start their construction until they get all those permits. So typically speaking, when a planning commission gets a site plan, it's at about 40% completion, conceptual and stuff. Once approved or blessed, that's when the engineers will typically go in and spend the time and money finalizing the plan, producing the calculations, and then submitting that to engineering for review and permitting.
So early summer,
That's not that's up to the applicant. They're
Okay.
the ones that will turn it in. Those permits usually get processed in a couple days.
great, thank you. I had a few questions related to the management operating plan, and we may need some help from the applicants on these. I was interested in whether there's any more detail available about the on-premise housing assistance program and what that consists of.
So I'm Brad Gerlach, I'm the facility manager. We have a resource manager on site that helps the guests, as we call them, look for housing or whatever other services they need. We also host other agencies, so Goodwill Outreach can come in. Anybody really who is providing a service that's essential. So that's how the housing component works.
Do we know which partner agencies will be helping you with this?
I mean, right now, there's not that many housing agencies. It's primarily Goodwill Outreach, candidly. So they're generally the ones who are in. We will refer to whatever source they need, disability network, et cetera, who can help with housing. It just varies, right? If we're full, we have 74 different people. There are probably 74 different paths to housing. So it's really our resource manager's job to sort what the appropriate referral is. Whether or not that agency comes on site is up to that agency. Everybody's welcome to come to the shelter and provide services.
Okay, thank you. Is there a plan for what information about your Safe Harbor guests is going to be compiled and tracked and how it might be made available?
I mean, that's a little bit of a crossover because the county has asked for certain things. We do have a database, so we can track just about anything and provide anything. The county has already provided kind of a list. I don't have it at hand of what it is, so that's more of a Pat question.
Okay.
My name's Pat Livingston. I'm the chair of the board for Safe Harbor. We do provide stats on gender, male, female. We also will let people know about those that are diverted. So there are some people that come to the shelter that may have better accommodations or really don't meet the needs that they need us. They're not in crisis. So there is a set of questions and there's a diversion team. And so those people are diverted elsewhere. And those stats will go back to the county and the city.
Okay. So if the city were interested in having any of those stats, we would be able to obtain them from the county?
I would assume if we're going to report them to the county, and I'm sure we'll go to the city as well with that. So that would be something that you could get, sure.
Great, thank you.
Jackie, can I go back to your previous question?
Sure.
I did notice it'd probably be even quicker on the stormwater permitting because their engineer has already included in their plan set all the calculations. So that's already there. As soon as they fill out the application, it'll get processed.
Great, thanks.
I think the benefit there is it's already a developed site, so they have a lot of knowns already, so.
Anything else from this body? Yeah, Commissioner Swanson.
Yeah, so obviously there's not a whole lot of new physical structures or anything built. The main thing is the parking lot, right? That's the main new addition. And that's tied to like an improvement through a grant of some sort.
Yeah, so they were awarded a CDBG, Community Development Block Grant distribution through that program approved by the City Commission, I think back in January, Leslie, is that right? Yeah, so, yep.
Not a chatty bunch on this topic. We did ask a lot of questions last time, and there have been some good ones tonight, and maybe it's because of the thorough SLUP paperwork.
Yeah, I read through that stuff and I was like, oh, these answer pretty much all of the questions that I could come up with, so.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm at a loss for questions.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest, if this was any other special land use permit that wanted to change your hours of operation, we wouldn't be here for a whole new thing. It's just, even the parking lot, it's just because of that. And
Really minimal.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if I can find it, I'll make the motion. Put it at the very, very end.
No.
It's at the end of the staff report, which is page 9 of 9 of the report. I don't know what page of the whole, so page 10 of the whole packet, or that item.
I'll make the motion that the findings in the staff report for special land use permit application 25 SLUP-01 be adopted, and that the special land use permit application submitted by Safe Harbor of Grand Traverse Incorporated to allow for year-round emergency shelter at 517 Wellington Street, location of the existing SLUP approved seasonal emergency shelter, be recommended to the City Commission for approval with the following conditions. 1, a pedestrian sidewalk be constructed connecting the parking lot on the east side of the property to the existing sidewalk along the south side of the building. Number 2, operations between May 15th and October 15th may commence upon approval by the City Commission, with all site improvements completed by November 15th, 2025. And 3, all applicable standards and requirements be met and permits secured prior to commencing approved site improvements.
Support.
Right, so we had a motion by McGillivray, support by O'Brien. correct?
Nope, nap.
Nap, okay, thank you, that's why I have to say that loud. 'Cause
Yeah. It was quiet,
Yeah.
but I watched it. I watched both eyes. So all those,
Well, so sidewalk south, sidewalk's gotta go north. It's gotta be on the north side.
So this was saying, you know where the,
Yeah. We can't do it because that's an enclosed area. We can't have guest access through that because those will be the guests who are already checked in. We have to keep that segregated. So that sidewalk would have to go on the north side of the building.
okay, so to that end, would you be willing to amend your motion, Brian, for a pedestrian connection approved by the planning director prior to issuing a permit for the condition number 1?
Yes, so moved.
Okay, Knapp, do you accept that amendment?
I do.
okay. Now we're voting on the motion. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Great. Thank you so much. Motion passes.
Sorry we didn't keep you here for 3 hours again this time, but in and out. Enjoy dinner.
Agenda item B, request to extend a previously approved conditional rezoning of the properties located at 523 and 525 Munson Avenue from C1 to C2 and 551 Munson Avenue from R1B to C2. I think this is just a formality, but I'll turn it over to you.
Yep, so in 2023, the applicant, John Collins, who is here with us tonight of Empire Sunset Investments, he is the owner of those 3 parcels, including the one with Third Coast Bakery on it, requested a conditional rezoning. Part of the motivation at the time for those that were here, if you recall, is that C1, where Third Coast is located, which is the northern kind of most property, doesn't allow retail except in buildings that existed before a certain date and limited to things like coffee shops and bakeries. Third Coast has done quite well, and John would like to support his tenants' success, but they can't expand the building at all. So in order to build a new building that can accommodate, it needed to be rezoned. With the residential right up against it, John voluntarily applied to conditionally rezone. So that's what's key, if you remember from that conversation, is it has to be voluntary, and the conditions that are presented have to be either accepted, thumbs up or thumbs down. There can't be negotiation with the planning commission or city commission. And he arrived at those conditions after many meetings with the residents that lived in the neighborhood right behind it. I believe it's Alagosa Trail is the name of it, the road back there. And so they provided the items that they would not like to see under C2 in that area. So he voluntarily included those in his conditions, which the city commission approved, and that went into effect July 6, 2023. The conditional rezoning is only valid for 2 years, but it does provide an opportunity for a 1-year extension approved by the city commission after a recommendation of the planning commission. So that's why it's to you today. Mr. Collins or any applicant in this situation needs to submit their request in writing at least 60 days prior to the expiration. So he has done so within that time limit. He has met with the zoning administrator and myself. He is working towards developing the properties. But as you guys are aware, the development climate is challenging right now. So it's taking some time, and he would like to request that extension to be able to keep working and moving forward on his planned project. So with that, again, John is here if there's any questions for the commission. And I believe there is a recommended motion in there. And if this is recommended by the planning commission, it will go to the city commission for final approval.
I have a
This-
question. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, this one feels like a formality. I know a fair chunk of us were here this first time around in 2023. It is very familiar to me. We talked a lot about this back then. So it makes a lot of sense to grant the extension, especially in the current times where it's just really hard, I think, to develop anything. So go ahead, Commissioner Knapp.
I just have one question. Well, for the applicant, does 1 year do it for you, or can we expect you this time next year? And is that possible for Mr. Winter?
Yeah, John Collins, Empire Sunset Investments. My understanding is you can only do 1 year. So longer is not possible. But we believe we'll make significant progress and be so close that we'll deal with it when we get there. But this allows us to keep the momentum going, which is a little bit small, but it's growing, and we just need an extension.
Yeah, and John is correct. The ordinance only offers a one-time 1-year extension. So in the event that expired and he hasn't commenced, I think it's substantial construction or something like that, he would then have to reapply and go through the process. And I believe it's 75% constructed at that point, and we haven't, in my time here, run into that. If we do, we will have to figure out how we determine a building being 75% complete. I am not a contractor, so, eyeballing it doesn't.
Well, that's what I'm
necessarily-
just trying to
Yeah.
help him avoid, because I was new to the commission when this first came to us, and it wasn't exactly a slam dunk, if I remember correctly. And
Yeah.
I support the project, and I just don't want to have to hear you give your spiel again.
No, I appreciate that. I appreciate that, but it's a tough economic time.
Sure.
Yeah.
And we're trying to move forward with something that's a benefit to the community and is economically feasible to happen.
It makes sense. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. And especially for you, 75%, that is just such a weird thing to have in the requirement. So, yeah.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. I mean, in full transparency, staff did recommend to John not doing conditional rezoning just because it does create these time limits and stuff. But again, he wanted to be a good neighbor, and that's the route he chose to take. And Planning Commission supported it.
Commissioner McGillivray?
Okay, so I know it says, and I know you think this is a formality, but I agree, it's, a reasonable expectation of completion of 75%, we don't have, they haven't submitted any site plans or anything like along those lines, correct?
Correct.
And so my question is, what has to be done? I mean, when they first proposed this, it was a pretty major project. If they just do a smaller project, does that meet the or does it have to be, doesn't seem like, wasn't here for the conditions weren't included in the packet. Did they require a certain footprint or size building?
No, so there wasn't a site plan, so he's not beholden to any kind of pre-approved development structure. The conditions were no adult use marijuana dispensaries, no brew pubs, no use of any rooftop space, I think from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., and that the rooftop, there was time durations for its use as
I understand all
private
those
development.
use conditions.
Those were the
right.
only conditions.
Okay, so there's not specifying any building.
No.
So he could put an addition on to the bakery and he would be qualified for now?
Yeah.
And then he could go forward and do that construction?
Yep.
So have you received any type of like site plans or anything for that site?
No site plans, just conversations that John has had with the zoning administrator.
And let me ask you, going forward, okay, so he doesn't want to put a 10-foot addition onto the building. He wants to actually do something substantive. He gets it, and it's going to require maybe even site plan review by this planning commission. Well, that's 2 months right there. Plus, he's going to give it to you. It's going to take at least a month review. That's 3 months. He's going to have to get engineering studies. He's not going to have any, you'd be lucky to get unless he's bringing to you a site plan, he'd be lucky to get you a shovel in the ground within the year, let alone anywhere close to 75% completion. So my question is, he starts that project, this expires, now what does he do?
Well, he could reapply for another conditional rezoning, or he could apply just to rezone the property to C2 without the conditions, and then there's no time limit on it anymore. He wasn't required to do the conditions again. That was his choice, but so there's a couple paths forward. None of them are probably as streamlined as everyone would like, but that's just the code that we're working within. And I think, to Anna's point, I think that's something we have to figure out once we have more information, because I don't have a site plan to comment how realistic it is that could be built in a certain amount of time or anything like that.
And all we have is the letter saying you're optimistic, you're going to make some progress.
I think you raised good points.
Yeah.
I'm aware of those.
Okay. So, yeah, I guess I'm okay with it. If it's, at any point, he can come back even during this extension and ask and basically reapply for a conditional rezoning, right?
Correct, yeah.
So he
Yep.
can come back in 6 months and say, okay, we're going forward. We've got our site plan. We're ready to go. We know we're not going to get it done in 6 months, and come back and you can go through the whole process again.
Yeah, and just as a reminder, that process is the same process as a complete rezoning. So public hearing, recommendation, city commission approval, mailings within 300 feet, newspaper notice, all that stuff would have to happen.
I just would, you start a big project before you turn and you put a shovel in the ground, I'd ask for a rezoning. I'd come back and ask you to apply again. Because the last thing you want to do is put money into it and have it come back and, who knows?
Yeah, and I will say, the city attorney and I both very strongly dislike conditional rezonings. It's something that's allowed for under the Zoning Enabling Act, but it does create challenges. One of the reasons we don't like it is most often it's used, Leslie and I were talking about the state, as a workaround to what the zoning requires. In this case, John didn't use it that way. He actually voluntarily gave himself a lot more restrictions than this a straight rezoning would have. But yeah, it's a challenging.
And I understand that, and I understand what he did. And my question, looking at the ordinance, is also the question of whether or not our timelines are reasonable.
And that's another thing.
Because,
This body has between now and July of 2026 to enact an amendment that would move that, change those timelines, because that's in the zoning ordinance, I'm sorry, you can't enact, you can recommend for enacting to the city commission, but you could initiate that process.
So would he be grandfathered in if we made that change, within this year?
I think, I would talk with the city attorney. I think he would, boy, that's a good question. I would find out, I think there would be an opportunity if he wasn't automatically allowed to operate under, say, an extended timeline that you guys move forward, that maybe he could have the order granting or the zoning agreement that is written up as part of his approval, have that go back to the city commission and have them through action amend that. So I think there's ways forward on that. It's a great question, but without having the city attorney here, I don't fully know the answer to that.
Yeah, because I don't think our timelines are reasonable. I mean, you're gonna come in, maybe come with the conceptual site plan, but you're not gonna put a lot of money into, site plan, engineering, architectural work without even having the zoning approved on a project. And right there, you're, easily 6 months or more, depending on, heck, it takes me 3-4 months just to get a conceptual site plan. So,
I think we could make the argument that it fits within one of our many goals that we established at the beginning of the year. If these timelines apply to, I would want to look back at them before I speak. But I think there are ways that we could creatively apply it to our goals, so that way we're not coming up against competing items that we have to get through, but it is something that we recognize is impactful to some applicants and hinders the process for some. So it might be worth it to look into, I think.
How many conditional rezonings applicants do you get, John, like in a year?
Not many.
Yeah.
There was a period when I first started where we had a lot of inquiries about it. I think people, again, saw it as a way to maybe work around some zoning restrictions. For a number of reasons, depending on the nature of the request, we try to steer them to a more appropriate approval process. But Leslie and I were talking today, I think TC Lofts is a conditional rezoning. The CVS at Front and Division, and that was to allow a drive-through because that district doesn't, and so the pharmacy has that. John Collins' property there in the TBA Credit Union. Yeah, so there's very few.
Very few. I guess I just wonder, is it like worth it to go through that process when we don't get that many conditional zoning, rezoning? I'm just devil's advocate, I guess, more than anything. Like, I don't want to create more work for myself than I have already. Like,
only because I think we found a hole that is a potential problem. Would I say that it is worth it to go down? Not if it takes a ton of time, but if it's one of those little bite-sized items that could impact some things going forward, I think it might be worth it. But
and I've also been on the commission where we've seen 2 of them expire.
Yeah.
Because they ran out of time. Wasn't gonna
turn
work
it
for them.
around. Yeah.
And, it makes sense to me to add a year onto both of those.
Yeah.
Entirely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not a complicated fix. I mean, it's only a few, but.
Yeah.
I'm not saying just for this applicant, but I don't think in today's, and it's really up here, and maybe this one day will change and we can go back, but it's just the demand on services to get people up here and getting on their schedule. I mean, it takes you months to get a surveyor.
Yeah.
So.
To Brian's earlier point, could the applicant come back and instead of doing a conditional rezoning, just apply to rezone it?
He could, yep, at any point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just another rezoning.
Yeah.
That reminded me of another conditional rezoning we have out there that this body approved an extension for, and that is Homestretch's property on Carver.
Yeah, we just did that one.
Yeah, because that was another case where, for them to move forward, they needed their LIHTC funding, and that took a couple rounds of applying through MISHDA. So, if that is, and you know, not to get off the agenda topic, but if that is the intent of the planning commission to revisit, or to visit that and explore it, we can put it on a future agenda for more discussion.
Sounds like there's consensus. I mean, I defer to the chair and the planning director to kind of fit that in where it may, but sounds like we have that kind of
I mean,
consensus.
Yeah, if you guys talk among yourselves, and if you think there's a negative to that, let us know.
Yeah,
But, you know, I don't know. But otherwise,
yeah.
you know, let's just make a text amendment.
So circling back to the applicant's specific request, do we have a motion? Commissioner O'Brien?
I'll make the motion to recommend the applicant's request to extend by 1 year the previously approved conditional rezoning request as allowable under the Traverse City zoning ordinance.
I support.
I did forget to do the public hearing. Can I do it now?
Or public comment, yep.
Yeah. So sorry, not
No,
hearing.
you typically
Yeah.
do it after motion anyways.
Okay, perfect. Would anyone like to make public comment on this item? Wonderful. Closing public comment. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Great. Motion carries. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
you. Oh, it's still me, y'all. I'm not used to talking this much. So agenda item C. This is the continuation of the short-term rental conversation. I just paraphrased that. Director Winter, would you like to introduce this one as well?
Yeah.
I think it's basically just a summary of our last conversation.
Yeah, that's correct. So there's no action request of the planning commission today, but as we mentioned at the last meeting, well, first of all, we really appreciated the direction you provided with the discussion on the percents. We have put them into this document for you for your review, as well as the proposed ordinance language that would need to be amended. Those red lines are in there. So we put in what is currently allowed in each district that allows vacation home rentals. And for the benefit of the public, again, short-term rentals is the umbrella term, which talks about residential properties used and occupied for less than 30 days. Underneath that umbrella, we have two categories: tourist homes and vacation homes. Tourist homes are where you live at the house, you're renting out a room or rooms while present. Vacation home rentals are what we more commonly think of with short-term rentals, the Airbnbs, the VRBOs, where a whole unit is rented out, no one needs to live there. So we've provided to you the percents that are currently allowed, what was discussed at the Planning Commission last time, and what that change will be. So of course, all the changes that are proposed are reductions. That was the intent of the Planning Commission. So we can see how those all play out there. And so all we're really looking for today is, if this accurately captures what you had wanted, then we will move forward with scheduling that public hearing, likely April 15th. And only after that point can a recommendation be made. It doesn't have to be made that night if there's more discussion that needs to occur. And we did mention that there's, you know, there may be opportunities to discuss some of the licensing stuff, or have the city commission liaisons on the planning commission bring that up. I know the planning commission kind of narrowed their focus, which I think was a good idea. You know, we were kind of all over the place there, just focusing on the vacation rentals, but there may be other changes there that aren't necessarily land use specific that affect them. But as we continue through this process, that's where the body, again, I'll emphasize the body, not individuals, like what is the will of the body, can express that to either staff or the city commission liaisons and move that to the next level for consideration.
And I guess if the city, I'm just looking at you, Commissioner Anderson, because Commissioner Treadwell is not here.
Yes.
But if you, the city representatives, take this forward and hear that there's interest, but then somebody has another idea, or there's more talk of other things we could do through the land use perspective, I know we'd be more interested in picking that up, because I know that this is like just a start to making the changes to the short-term rentals. So we would be, yeah, I would love that. Yeah, Commissioner Anderson.
Appreciate that comment, and I think you know that I have requested a study session on the subject. So we'll see if I'm successful at that or not. I did have, sort of along that line, I was going to mention again my hope to get some information, some more detailed data about the existing short-term rental licenses in the city. Specifically, I would be interested in knowing how many new licenses are issued annually, how many licenses are renewed every year, how many licenses lapse every year, and the average years of activity before a specific license lapses, just to get a sense of the rotation. And I did want to verify that currently active short-term rental licenses are fully transferable with a property ownership change.
I don't know if that is true, but again, we don't handle that in our department. That would be something for the clerk's office. I
Okay.
don't do you know, Jerry? Because you do the mapping. I don't know that they're transferable, but the new owner can apply.
Yeah, I think they have to reapply. but
Yeah,
they-
and even the ones that are grandfathered in districts, there's a handful of those where they're not currently allowed, or they don't transfer, but they have a window of like 90 days after closing that they have to reapply themselves to keep that non-conforming status legit.
Okay.
Yep.
And so the clerk's office would also be the source of information about current licensing fees and the history of changes and so forth.
Yeah, and I'm taking some notes on that I'll put in a request to them to see if they can start compiling that data.
Great, thank you.
I did learn, for example, today that some people may have the license but not currently operating it that way. So I do think it would be helpful. Commissioner McGilvery?
Okay, I got a question you're not going to like. It's a request, actually. So I'd like to know how many non-conforming uses are in the C1 and C2 districts. And I'd like to know how many non-conforming uses we're going to create with these changes in all the other districts.
So when you say non-conforming uses in the C1 and C2, are you talking just about vacation home rentals?
Yes.
Okay.
So how many short-term rentals are currently, and I don't even know, it's an interesting question. Because I don't know how the city is even handling that. If you have a building with, we'll make an even number, with 40 units, and 30 of them are, and 30 of them are, we only allow 10, 30 of them are, so which 10 become the allowed and which 20 become the grandfathered in? And how does the city determine that? Based on the order of the licenses?
That's a good question, yeah. So I will talk with the city attorney on that one. We've had a lot of questions or a lot of conversations on the non-conforming.
Because the new
Status.
buildings, they deed them. They specify which ones will be, and those are the first ones to sell, and they sell for more money. But in, at least traditionally they have. But I'm just wondering what kind of nightmare headache we're making here. And how the clerk's currently dealing with it. If they consider any of them non-conforming. I mean, how do you consider them non-conforming? I mean, are they non-conforming? Because no one specified which 10 of those 30 are allowed. And does the city even have the authority to do that?
Yeah,
Or are they all non-conforming?
I don't think they all would be, and it's a good question. There is.
But you're not a lawyer.
I am not a lawyer.
And how they figure things out are different than how the rest of us.
Oh, yes. And I did put that link in the packet that when they first started issuing limits to this is why we have some that are grandfathered. So the city commission adopted a resolution for how to deal with that grandfathering. So that may be something that has to happen then at that city commission level.
That must have happened after I left, because when we adopted the licensing agreement, I don't think we addressed the grandfathering in.
Yeah, see, this one's signed, it says April 5th It was amended April 5th, 2021.
Yeah, I was there.
That was the.
We were both
That was
there,
like
but
that.
I don't.
But that was the city commission that did that.
Oh.
And it was first adopted at a special meeting on July 27th, 2020. This is, I know for me, a black hole in my memory during COVID. Like that whole time
Yeah.
span just kind of all blurs together. So, and I didn't start till March of 21, but I don't remember that even being at the city commission. But this wouldn't have come out of our office. This would have come out of probably the attorney's office.
Okay.
Were you able to track all of Commissioner Anderson's requests? She went through them quickly, so I just want to make sure that he got them all down. I can
So
repeat them.
Jackie, I had on my list, how many new are issued versus renewed, how many lapse, average time holding a license before lapsing. Did I miss any?
Nope, you got them
Okay.
all.
And
I didn't,
I
so
will
I'm glad.
provide, I can't guarantee that they have data on all of that, is what I want to say now, but I'll send that all to them if that's what you wanted.
Thank you. Sorry, I just wanted to get that because I couldn't keep up, so I wanted to make sure we all got that.
I have
Yeah.
another question. So how are we justifying the 25% for C4C compared to 50% for C4A and C4B?
I mean, that was
I think that was
yeah.
me,
Yeah, the number that the planning commission landed on.
but I think that was because, oh, my memory. I think it was because of the number of properties that are in those spaces. Like C4C right now, for example, has a ton of new housing development just from the last couple of years, whereas C4A and C4B only had maybe one or two properties. So I think it was trying to encourage/discourage that number in the areas that have lots of units right now.
That's what I recall from the planning commission's conversation is they were looking at the map and where some of the larger, more dense residential developments were. A lot of them were in the C4C. There was talk about not wanting to see those, flip to suddenly be 100% like a trail side situation. That's just what I recall.
I'm just looking, it's a question that's going to come up. And I
Yeah.
just want to make sure we're on the record as
Yeah.
addressing it.
Yeah, I think, yes, I remember it being specific to the fully completed buildings that are already occupying those spaces in C4C.
Another question, D1 district? Which district is that?
8th.
No,
Isn't it?
8th
No.
is D2.
Yeah,
Oh.
so it's the old ironworks, so Haggerty area,
And
Old Town, or
D3
Midtown.
then is the Red Mill.
Hall Street.
Red Mill, Gillis, that area.
And my question is, when you talked about we've talked maybe rezoning that for years. And what would you think it would be rezoned to if it ever happened?
C4A.
Yeah, I think we just talked about that.
Yeah, and that's what the master plan calls for in that section. Doesn't increase the building height of the D1. It's the same 45-foot height building limit, but it does start to introduce more special requirements that apply downtown that we don't see in the D districts as much. Less so in D2 because of the amendments you guys did in, I think, 2020 to D2.
I'm just saying, so if we changed it, it would then go from
Yeah, 25 to
25%
50.
to 50%.
If you want them to be consistent, then within what's proposed, you could adjust one or the other
I'm
to
just
match.
raising the questions. So for discussions, that's all.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, I understand there's you've got projects going in some of these zones that are planned or going in. So you can make that argument there too. But, you know, it's just, no, I'm okay with it.
I don't really see any bites on the the topic. I see this as a starting point. I see this as a work in progress. Maybe we can come back. Like, we're gonna have to keep adapting this. Who knows if the city commission even likes this model or if they want a different model. So I really do see it as like a foundation to start from. And then we have Commissioner Anderson who can say, if we think that D1 will be transforming into a C4A, she can bring the experience that she had from here, because maybe city commissioners also have that thought and are interested in more uniformity between those regions, those districts.
I just, you know, I'm sorry, this is a big bite for the city commission. Okay, we've been talking about this for 2 years now, or our second year. It's been on the agenda. And city commission's gonna look at this and look at these numbers, and they're gonna be asking, where did they come up with these numbers? And, you know, and they don't understand it. People don't understand things, they tend to vote no. So, and, you know, it's just one thing on their very large plates.
Yeah, I hear you, and I also frankly don't want to spend more time on it if we haven't even heard what they think. So
No,
it's like
I
chicken or the
understand.
egg.
No, and I understand,
Yeah.
I agree. I'm just saying that, you know, we're at these numbers and this stuff, and, you know, I've been in Commissioner Anderson's position where you're trying to explain the thought process behind it, and sometimes you're successful and sometimes you're not.
Yeah.
You know, and it's a lot to do in a meeting. You can't like sit around and have coffee with 4 or 5 of them and talk it over. You know, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
You got your time slot before people are like, okay, let's move on. My head's starting to hurt.
Yeah.
All been there.
Commissioner Anderson?
I think it would be helpful to the city commission to understand the likelihood of a rezone from a 50% proposed percent short-term rentals to a 25% category and vice versa. I think if we can give them any guidance on the fluidity of these zoning categorizations right now, that would be helpful.
Well, I guess I would go back to you, Planning Director. I don't, and the rest of the board, I don't remember that being a goal. I don't even remember it being like a sub-goal.
Well, it's in the master plan.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this is our goal. And the question is, if you want to make it consistent, maybe you make this change, or maybe we see something else.
Got it.
I think
Knowing
we're
that
gonna
we'll
have
get to that
have an
vision.
explanation for every change in here.
Okay.
Okay? I think that's the way it's going to have to go, why we came up with this number. Like, for example, community center. Well, some of us wanted 50%, some of us wanted 25%. We settled on 35. It was a negotiated
It was.
agreement.
Yeah.
And perhaps because we realized we wanted to reduce the number of non-conforming uses in the zone, you know. So that's why we didn't settle on 50%.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, but some of them, it's just, you know, because we thought of the, you know, I think we've gone over it, and, you know, we talk about the different districts, the amount of housing, the type of housing it is, you know, what's it worth, the cost for making conversions, you know, to residential, when they can be done, it's not easy, you know, so, you know, that's, you know, we're looking at the building types and everything else in those districts, or as opposed to new construction, new buildings that are apartment buildings, large amounts of housing. Do we want them all short-term rentals? No. So I think our reasoning is there. I just think we're going to have to identify it going forward for the changes.
Yeah.
So,
Commissioner Anderson?
I would be grateful for that, because the thing I would not want to do is find myself representing the action of this commission to the city commission on something that appears on the surface to be arbitrary.
Because
So,
yeah, and it's a lot, because of all the changes to different districts. So it's a lot.
Well, was there any requested action on this one? No, there was not.
Nope. So again, this would be
So
a
we
zoning
could-
amendment, so it would require a public hearing. You have to have one in the process, and typically you want something that you're holding the public hearing on. So we have to get to this point, something that people can absorb and comment on. So if the planning commission at this point is tentatively settled with these percentages, then we can move forward with going ahead and noticing the public hearing. That doesn't mean you're locked into these, at that meeting or a subsequent meeting, you could still make adjustments, but a public hearing does have to be held and no action can be taken until that occurs. So that's where we're at right now.
Do you have a slated anticipatory date for when that would?
April 15th.
Okay.
Yep. So about
So-
a month from now.
Between now and then, oh, sorry, go ahead, Commissioner Anderson.
wouldn't we want to have our rationale marshaled and in place before the public hearing?
Yes, that's what I was hoping for. I was thinking, do we have enough time to think that through independently and then feed that through staff for then all of us to review in advance of that meeting, because that's a full month away. That seems like plenty of time for me, because I do feel like there is consensus over most of this, with the exception of the one that Commissioner McGillivray just brought up. That's the only one that needs a stronger justification because of the master plan. So does that timeline feel okay to people? Do they not think that's enough time? We also, you
Yeah,
also have the
so-
request from the clerk, or to the clerk.
Yep, and that shouldn't take long.
Okay.
I mean, it's in the database or it's not. It's there,
Okay.
or it's available or it's not. So that's what we have to find out. I will say, just as someone who's listened to these, tell me if I'm wrong on this, but it was my impression that 25% was kind of like a strong starting point, because that's where the planning commission landed the last time they went through this process, and that the 25% kept it primarily long-term, so those living there weren't, outnumbered by the short-term units. We talked about that at the last meeting, that we've heard stories from individuals who live in these buildings full-time, that it's quite miserable, actually, to have a revolving door. So it keeps it primarily a long-term rental structure. Now, the discussions that I heard downtown noted that the environment downtown, as it relates to, say, economic activity and tourism and stuff, was maybe a more appropriate location to allow a higher percentage. But again, if you notice, none of them are above 50%, because they always wanted to keep it at least half long-term. So, and then the 35, again, Brian, I think, captured that well. That was kind of negotiated. It made my brain slightly explode. I was hoping the zoning administrator would wave red flags, but he was like, nope, I can make that number work, no problems. I'm like, man. So that one stayed as it is. And then the exception being the HR district at 100%, because that is kind of what that district is designed for. So that's what I heard. Please correct me if I'm wrong, because I can start putting that into the memo that will be issued prior to the public hearing, as well as anything that you guys want to send to us. We can incorporate that justification as well for the public.
We meet on tax day? Isn't that a national holiday? April 15th?
Good luck. Not that I'm aware of.
I mean, what about, but I'd like to see the amount of grandfathered, and I did see I'll check the vacation home rental administrative policy. I did not remember doing that.
Oh, there it goes.
Well, this is good timing on some of these data requests, because it's a ghost town here next week. So
Yeah.
staff will have time we don't get many people in during spring break, so we'll have some and there's no meetings going on next week to tie staff up. So I think we can probably make some headway on that. I'll get with them tomorrow, and yeah. And again, the public hearing isn't a mandate that you have to take action that day. It's just a step in the process, and can go on for a lot longer. And if the planning commission diverted too far away from what was held at the public hearing, I would probably recommend you hold another public hearing, because now you've created a wildly different product than what the public originally weighed in on. So, but those are the decisions we have to make as we go through that process.
Just because I wanted to have a visual of C4A versus D1. D1 is like Cass Street and Lake, so the Haggerty building up to the corner. And then C4A is the warehouse district, and the Breakwater's not here. What is here? The farmer's market parking lot?
The chamber or Traverse Connect
Oh,
building.
that's right. And then the south side of Front Street, all the way down by past Bubba's, so like that vacation rentals property. So those are the three C4A, biggest C4A chunks, and the condos on Boardman and State.
Most of the C4A has to do with, the different letters are height designations.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. There's building height designations.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing about it is, it's interesting because I'm looking at your policy, to go back on the policy thing. It's just, it really doesn't say what happens if you're in a C2 or a C1, C2, or D2. It doesn't specify who's non-conforming. It doesn't tell you, are you non-conforming or you're not. Basically, it says, if you don't continue your license, we're going to yank it. And then you're pretty much out. So, but it doesn't really identify how many are non-conforming or conforming, so.
And it only applies to C1, C2, D2?
Yeah, because it's the 25% rule.
Oh, yeah,
Some of those
right.
buildings were almost 100%, short-term rental licenses. Especially on like 8th Street. Yeah, so, they were selling like hotcakes back in the, when it was really busy. It was high demand times, but, like I said, that's, cooled. It's just, interesting, way it wraps around, but, yeah, so I just want to know how many more potential non-conformings we're making. So, technically, you've got a building and you've got 50 units in it or whatever, 40 units, and if you've got, if you got 20, then you got 10 non-conforming. So I don't know how easy that is for you guys to research and figure out, but, and then same thing for the going forward, because it's by building, it's by structure. So it's not by block or anything like that. So.
Go ahead.
That's it. That's why I'm like, I just want to make sure that, we can get that information, because you guys got nothing to do next week. That's good.
Does the
But if you
timeline,
can't, then maybe we go to push it out to May.
yeah. Does the timeline feel okay with everybody else? That kind of timeline? And like Planning Director Winter said, we can always decide after that first public hearing, okay, we need to come together, have one more meeting, and then move on it. So we can take time after, if we decide we're here for 4 hours one night because people have thoughts about it. I don't think that's going to happen. From what we've heard from the community, they're looking for some sort of limitations because the market is so saturated. But that's just what I've heard from a couple of people. You never know what turns out at a public hearing, so.
Yeah, I think you guys have raised some really good questions. I've taken a lot of notes on this. I'll have a conversation with the attorney tomorrow to start that, specifically what you're saying, Brian, like we reduce the percentage and they're already there. How do we deal with that? and what policy needs to be made there. I think at the end of the day, really, that's more the city commission's role, that policy, even though these are good questions to raise, because I can funnel them up there. I think the planning commission's focus really is on the land use side of, how do we want to distribute these throughout the districts, or the community rather, with districts, so, yeah. See where we go.
Okay. Do you need anything else from us on that topic then?
I
Or
don't.
can I go to public comment?
Yeah, I think that's all I need.
Okay.
And prior to the 15th, if we can get this data compiled, we can always email it to you all ahead of a packet, just so you can start digesting it. So
I would love
we won't
that.
gatekeep it.
Yeah,
Hey,
I would
Maxwell,
love that.
thank you.
Okay, let's move to public comment on this agenda item. Is there any public comment? Great, closing public comment. And I would appreciate any and all of that information sooner rather than
Well, and
in
I
a
just
packet.
got a message from our zoning administrator that we have that number. So I don't know what that means, but apparently he's watching and he's not concerned about the data request, so.
Well, thank you very much for that.
Uh,
So now we move on to this receive and file section. Tell me more, because this
Ah.
is new, I think.
Yeah, and sometimes we just send these to you via email, but Katie and I talked, we just kind of added that section in the agenda for receive and file. These are notices that we receive. Typically, they're also sent to the Planning Commission, but they're intended to go to the Planning Commission. They often land on our desk first. So just like when we started our master plan, or whenever you amend it, you have to email or notify the chairs of the neighboring planning commissions your intent to plan. So it looks like East Bay Township is looking to amend their plan. If I recall, it may have to do with their beach district that they're working on. And then the other one is a notice of public hearing. We apparently, as a city-owned property within 300 feet of Copper Ridge, where that's a PUD development, and they would like to do some changes. Primarily, they're looking at, if I recall from hearing at the Joint Planning Commission, an improved area where the trail access parking is over there. That's really the focus of what they're looking at. So those are just for your information. When you do receive those, though, if there's ever an issue that the Planning Commission would say, hey, we would like to send correspondence to, that would be your opportunity to have a discussion on that. And that has happened in the past at the city. The couple planning commissioners will take it upon themselves to work on a letter and then bring it back to get the blessing of the full commission. So they're for your reference.
No staff concerns?
No, not at this time. For us, most of this has been on our radar, just talking with our colleagues and what they've been working on out there. And I believe, Maxwell, you are involved as a participant in East Bay's efforts, I think, with their beach district. Is that correct? I don't know if you had anything you wanted to share from that experience or what they're working on.
No, just that I've had the opportunity to attend a couple of their meetings. One of their focuses is trying to understand what the best way to fund some of the improvements that they have planned. So the last meeting that I attended, they were kind of working with their consultant to understand what their options were as far as like having a corridor improvement district or what other tools that they could use to help fund those improvements. So,
Okay.
Yep.
Cool. And then for the Planning Commission's knowledge, a corridor improvement district or corridor improvement authority is it's essentially a TIF district along a corridor that helps fund those improvements. Because a lot of times those corridors aren't just used by the residents of that. It's a regional corridor, so it allows that cost sharing to fund the public improvements that then may generate increased taxable value. So one thing with those, like there's a bunch of different TIFs that exist out there. There's brownfield TIFs, there's the housing TIF, there's also DDA TIFs, but like a DDA TIF, I think you can only have one DDA essentially district, but you can have multiple corridor improvement authorities within a jurisdiction, so then they all become slightly different.
Makes sense?
Okay.
Okay, announcements.
Not much here. We will not be having a meeting on April 1st. I won't be here for that. The chair won't be here. I will not be here next week while staff is working on compiling that data. So I won't be around to put together a packet even for.
Yeah.
I know. I was happy to pass that one along, right? So keep sending them my way. We gotta find staff. No, I'll be going on vacation with my family, and then I'll be from there attending the National Planning Conference in Denver this year. So I'll come back the night of the 2nd. I'll share with you what I learned, current trends, and things like that. But we have no agenda items before us right now, so we'll just shift everything to the 15th at this point. That's all I have.
Perfect time to do a text amendment.
To what?
A text amendment.
Oh, wait, I think Jackie had a.
Oh, sorry, Commissioner Anderson.
No problem. I just thought that you'd like a report from last night's city
Oh, yeah,
commission
would love.
meeting, that the ordinance amendment for increased density in R2 passed the city commission by a vote of 4-3. So it will be scheduled for possible enactment on April the 7th.
Is
Yes.
that the public hearing?
They're not required
Oh.
to have a public hearing,
Okay.
but they are required to take action to introduce per charter an ordinance, any kind of new ordinance, and then wait at least 14 days. Now, they are not having their meeting on the 31st or next week, I believe, right? So your next meeting will be the 7th.
Correct.
Correct.
Got
It's
it.
a real slow time around here.
Any other announcements? Wonderful. Okay, we'll go to public comment again, general public comment.
Just Reed, city resident. Just letting you know is we had Safe Harbor up here earlier. They're talking about what resources they use for housing. As far as housing goes, we have a very short supply of that. And only reason we can change that is with zoning changes, smart growth zoning changes. So to go ahead and you said Goodwill Industries is the only one that has financing for the whole entire thing with housing to get people into housing. That is because that is the only group that's around here. There is nobody else, and they have to work within what resources that they have. So in order for them to get more resources and for them to have more housing options is zoning changes. Traverse City either needs to grow or it can go stale and not grow and just have more consequences of more issues and problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Closing public comment. I think this meeting is adjourned.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
I was slow on the draw and did not see her. I told Maxwell.